Well, good morning, everyone. Great to see many of you made it from the party last night. My name's Bronwen. I'm from Brisbane, and I'm pretty excited to be down in Melbourne at NDC today. So today we're going to lock 1,000 architects in a room and try and get them to agree. But before we start, I just want to frame it a little bit. So first, I want to get you to imagine that you're in charge of a software development team where every member of your team is a perfect expert. They're always available, they're infinitely scalable, and they're exceptionally skilled. Now, this software company now is able to build software at breakneck speed and exceptional quality. If last year was the year of the co-pilot, this year is shaping up to be the year of the AI-driven agents. There's been a bit of phenomenon in the startup scene over the last couple of years where we've started to see human labor being replaced by agents and chatbots. The startups themselves have started to lead this, and they've started to replace people and types of work that originally we never thought was possible. Even important people like software developers, architects, decision makers, lawyers, and maybe even doctors. I've got a couple of examples just to show you, to give you a bit of a background. The first one is Devon. So this one's been in on the internet a little bit. So what they got famous for was they created an AI that would successfully pass a bunch of the practical engineering interviews. They specialised in doing the type of engineering that would clean up a code base. There was a bunch of different posts as well that sort of claimed that maybe it was all a bit smoke and mirrors, or maybe it wasn't as good as what it originally thought, but it was very specialised and good at what it did. But even the CEO themselves said, software engineering in the end, is in the real world it can be really messy. So example number 2, Kalana. They're a fintech company, so they released an AI assistant that handled 2/3 of its customer service chats in the first 2 months, which ended up being equivalent to 700 FTEs. That's a lot of people. And the third one, these guys came out of Y Combinator 2025. The whole premise of their company was to buy other companies and replace each of the human workers with AI. And that's what we're going to start looking at today. So many of us may have used some of the chat tools to help us to do some designs or do some coding or even develop an architecture. How many people here would consider themselves an architect? Quite a few, yeah. How about pure devs? Business users? That's me, cool. So quite often I might use a ChatGPT or something else to help me think about an architecture or help me think about a different way to look at something or give me an alternate view. But what if instead of being able to consult one architect, I could consult 1,000 different architects with a different personality, with a different expertise, and different ways of working? As if you've ever, tried to get, a few quotes, for something at home like plumbing or electrical, once you get past 3, then how do you work out which one to go with? They're so different. But what if you asked the experts to work out which one was correct for you? So what we're going to do today is we're going to use the experts to help us work out which of their architectures are the actual best ones. So to do that, we're going to use as much of the AI coding as possible. So to do that, we need a complete setup. So we're going to have a client. We need a client. The client needs to have a specification. We need to have our architects, and they need to have a design, and then we'll work out which one we think is the best. So the client. So I came up with a company called Loom Ventures. Purposely picked this name because I'm going to get AI to help me write all things about it. So Loom Ventures is a venture capital firm. It's going to be dedicated to empowering visionary entrepreneurs and early stage startups. At Loom Ventures, we believe that great ideas are woven together with innovation, strategy, and support. Blah, 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 about us. Then our mission. Our mission is to invest in groundbreaking technology in innovative business models that have the potential to redefine industries. We see startups as the intricate threads in the fabric of progress. And we are committed to helping founders weave their ideas into sustainable, high-impact businesses. Then we have all this sort of stock standard stuff that you would expect about a venture capital firm. They look after early stage investments. They do strategic partnerships, incubate, tech and AI focused. They have a founder-first approach, visionary investment, strong ecosystem, all the sorts of things you'd expect to see on one of those company visions. But then why should you join us? Whether you're a founder looking for a strategic partner or an investor seeking the next big opportunity, Loom Ventures is here to help turn bold ideas into reality. Let's weave the future together. So very obviously written by an AI there. So now that we have our client, we need to make up a specification so that our architects can come up with something to build. So again, we use a prompt for this. So I got it to create a detailed specification for all aspects of the web application required for the following company. And I wanted to keep it as functional requirements only, and they'll be sent out to various companies to propose a detailed design. So this is what it gave me back, a bunch of purposes and objectives, what the target audience is, that we want a public website with a bunch of examples about us, portfolios. We want an engaging homepage, a dedicated investor page for resources. We want to have insights, blog posts, site-wide search. We want to have different user authentication and roles. We want to have a CMS with analytics and statuses and all the standard sort of things. We want to have emails, analytics, social media API integration. We want to have data and security. We want to have performance and scalability, SEO, and of course, reporting and analytics. So the sorts of things that you would expect to see, maybe a little more than you'd expect to see on one of these types of websites. So we've got our client, we've got our specification. Now we need to look at what are these architects going to be. So for the architect, I decided to split it into two parts. So we want to give an architect a persona. And because I tend to be quite visual and it's quite nice to look at photos, we also want to give them a profile image. So I started with the persona prompt. So I wanted to create a high quality persona in a JSON format for a software design architecture and security expert. And using the following attributes, I will show you that in a bigger font in a minute. Create a realistic person to be used for LLMs to emulate thinking design choices and languages. So then I gave it a bunch of different items for the template so that it could give us a very big range of names, aliases, what sorts of expertise they would have, what were their tech stack preferences, their writing styles, their learning and innovation approach. So you could have heaps and heaps of different items. This is the ones that it came up with and I thought they were not too bad. And if there was something specific that you wanted to target in or what you wanted to iterate on, obviously you can change those as well. And then I gave it a specific JSON format that I wanted it to output in, so I had some sort of consistency of like how to process them as well. So this was the example JSON I gave it. What sorts of writing styles, so it was all similar. So that was the start of the template, and then asked it to complete it with realistic values for each attribute. So this is an example one that I generated. So we had Miguel. He's got 15 years of experience. He does cybersecurity. He has compliance familiarity with GDPR and SOC 2, etc. And his favorite thought leaders are Jean Kim and Martin Fowler. So it was picking a few real people there as well. So I made his personality, I made his specialization. Then I wanted to create his picture. So I wanted to generate for an architect a realistic professional profile headshot on a simple background with no extra design elements in a 1:1 aspect ratio for the following persona, and gave it all that information that you just saw. And this is what it gave me back. So originally, for most of them, I used DALL-E 3 because it was free, but for the ones that I really wanted to show you, I did cheat and went back and used the chat GPT image because it gives you a much better picture first go rather than keep trying. So here is Miguel. So we've got Miguel from Equatorial Guinea. He's a software architect, specializes in Python, Java, Docker, Azure, etc. So that's one architect. But we also then want to look at how to make him give us an architectural design. So again, we went out and used the LLMs to create for us. So for the design prompt, we gave it the persona. So as the following persona, produce a detailed design for the specification below. So that big specification, send it in. This is a detailed functional spec outlining every major feature and workflow expected from the Loom Ventures application. The document is designed to serve as a blueprint for vendors, and then give it the specification and the persona to give us the output. And so this is what it's produced for Miguel. Oops. So it's actually produced quite a large document. It's done it in like a markdown format. It's got headers, it's got your introduction, goes through its like technology stack, front end, middleware, back end, describes the microservices architecture that it's decided to use, the containerization, different cloud infrastructure, and then it's gone through like the different functional components and how it would implement them. About us, each of the pages that we talked about in our specification, and then how it would use like team photographs, infographics, different types of sorting that it would use, regional filtering based on geography, etc. As you can see, it just keeps going. It's quite long. So we've got a single design and a single architect seem to work okay, but then we wanted to scale that out to 1,000. So just in the back of your mind, think about what sorts of elements you would incorporate into what architecture you would supply for something like this. So when I thought about scaling this out to 1,000, what was the actual goal here? Was I really wanted to get a range of diverse views. So there's heaps of different, like, each of those elements you could iterate on as well. But the couple that I kind of wanted to force onto it were I wanted a diverse range of genders, I wanted a diverse range of country backgrounds, and I wanted a range of technology experience just to see the range of designs that I would get from it. So for the first one, I thought it was the easiest way to do this would give it an even split of 50-50 genders. For the countries, it was a little bit more interesting. Does anyone know how many countries there are in the world? 200? Anyone else? 180. Any other numbers? 217. 246. Almost all of you are correct, actually. So, like in software development, it always depends. So it depends which data set you're using. So these ones that I found, it ranged, right? So it's between 195 and over 300. So that was an interesting just little side note of like how many countries are there actually in the world. For the example, I chose to use a Python library called PyCountry. So it uses the ISO 3166-1. That has 249. So with that, then I was like, how should I actually disperse these? Should I do it by population? So then like Australia would all pretty much end up with none. Or should I do it by the number of software engineers? But I decided that just to give it like a really nice even split, I would essentially, because I want 1,000, there's 249 countries, I'll just divide it. So pretty much we get 4 each, and then a couple of countries get a bonus one. So we've divided our countries up as well. So then what I did was I went off and generated 1,000 different personas and 1,000 different images for them. So this is our architects, and I'd like you to meet them now. And then as you're scrolling through, looking at the different photos, does anyone have any observations or feelings about like the pictures?
Some pictures look very old.
Yeah, some look old.
Some pictures have 2 people in them.
Some people have 2, yep. They take care of their skin, yeah. So for me, like what I found was everyone, so we've got a range of genders, we've got an obvious range of different people, like ethnicities, but everyone was quite very average. Like their average build, average looking, like very similar hairstyles, like there's like some sort of thing going with the side part. There's a couple of people with grey hair, there's like, I think there was 1 or 2 that were bald, but not many. The hair was quite conservative, like there wasn't like reds and purples and all sorts of funky different hair colors. So I found them all quite average, even though we'd done this amazing range of different personalities. The thing I did find quite interesting when generating 1,000 different people was I did actually hit problems with the responsible AI policy. So even though I was only giving it quite what I considered safe things like, gender, country of origin, and stuff like that, sometimes I was tripping up on it. And I did find that if I tried again, it would just work. Some of them took 3 goes, but eventually it did just work. So definitely had to make this retriable so that I could eventually get all of the pictures generated. So then after we had a bit of a play with it, and I decided I'd have a little bit of a look up and see what makeup we actually ended up with these personas. So this was when I looked at it, this was the specialities. So as you can see, there's a little bit skewed there. So we ended up with a lot of zero trust architecture, security, cloud security, microservices, zero trust security. And this was starting to make me worry that I'd kind of skewed our data set a little bit. So I had a little bit more of a look at another parameter. So I looked at the industry that they said they were from. So again, we've got cybersecurity and enterprise architecture, cybersecurity. So funnily enough, when I looked at the designs I started to generate, all of them were very much cybersecurity centered. And what I realized was giving it that example, sort of JSON with some examples in it, had really skewed what it generated over 1,000 instances. So I was a bit worried that my whole idea was flawed. My persona makeup and years were okay. But then when I started playing with this, we really only had the chat completion models. So sort of reasoning models kind of saved me here. So reasoning models came to the rescue. So what the difference is with these two, if you haven't played with them, is the planners. So if we talk about the OpenAI type version, so the O series versus the GPT series. So we have the planners versus the workforce, the workers. So I think the nice way to describe it was having the difference between a senior developer versus a junior developer and how that you would use them differently. So there's obviously pluses and minuses for both. One of the big ones is cost or speed. So when I re-ran this, I did it on O3 Mini, but since then O4 Mini has come out, so it's a little bit different again since I ran it. So O4 Mini is really good for reasoning, but not quite as fast as the GPTs. And then the big difference you'll see is the price. So you're looking at $1.10 versus 40 cents for each run. So when you're thinking about it, you do have to think about cost and whether or not it's the right model to use. But so we looked at this and decided to try it again with a reasoning model to see if we could help it to balance itself out without having to force it. So some of the key differences when you're using the reasoning models versus the GPTs was you sort of start to change how you do the prompting as well, because it's more of a senior person rather than a junior. So before we had the system messages, they have a similar concept, but they call them developers, so you move some stuff up into there. You make your prompts much simpler because it can do a lot more thinking and reasoning itself. So rather than giving it lots and lots of detail, you don't have to use the chain of thought and get it to explain things to you in that slowed down version, because it does its own reasoning in the background. And then try using the zero-shot learning first. So what I was doing in that previous one was giving it all that JSON as an example. We can try removing that to see if it can just work it out. Give it some guidelines and be specific about your end goal. So I went back and I've updated my persona prompts. So this time, I just asked it to create a realistic persona in JSON format and gave it some guidelines of the things that I wanted it to cover, and I sent in the specific ones that we were going to iterate on that I was wanting to force. So I sent in the specific gender, country, and years of experience. But I just wanted it to be rounded and realistic. And then instead of giving it a specific JSON, I just asked it to give me a valid JSON in a well-structured format with key value pairs. So that's, and I gave it some of the expertise and stuff. So the key differences there was I took out that big chunk of JSON that I had before that seemed to have been skewing the result and sort of let it do its thing. And then the key difference, if you use the OpenAI API, there's other ones as well, you have to update it to the newer version, so you have a few extra parameters here. So now you get this, the reasoning effort, so there's low, medium, high, so that'll change how much time and how many tokens and how much it's going to cost you when it thinks through this stuff. So that one I've done as low, but I did actually go back through and just use sort of medium level reasoning. And then you can help it decide how many tokens you're willing to spend, because that'll change how big your context window is. So it wasn't much of a code change to try and do it again. And then off I went again. And my persona makeup second time round I felt was a little bit more realistic. So we had architects, lead software architects, and then because I had the range of experience now, we went all the way down to a junior software architect. It wasn't quite so skewed to one side in just cybersecurity. Then I also went back and updated my design prompt because I wanted it to use that same sort of reasoning as well. So instead of specifically giving it things, I told it to use its experience and provided a report. And I wanted to force it into Markdown because it looks nice when I look at it in GitHub. And then also later, it's a bit nicer to process and view. And just hinted that I wanted to, if it wanted to use some nice diagrams and stuff, that that would be good. But I didn't make a lot of change. It was mainly like telling it to use its own experience to come up with the design. So if I went, generated another 1,000 designs, and it was really quite interesting to see the variety that it came out with. So some of the, what I thought were kind of the highlights was a lot of them started to use ASCII art for some of the workflows and stuff like that, which I couldn't imagine doing that manually. And then if anyone's ever used Markdown, so a lot of them use the Markdown, the mermaid format, so end up with these really beautiful flow diagrams and sequence diagrams and stuff for the architectures. And then just to go through and see what the differences were when you started to look at how changing that personality affected the output. So I grabbed the 4 Australians and had a look through their designs. So across actually every design I looked at, it always used US spelling. So, and that stood out to me because, you know, the Zs instead of the Ss for Australian. But all the Australian designs started to refer to APP, which is Australian Privacy Principles, as well as other privacy principles. So their region, they'd started to incorporate some of those elements into its design. Then I grabbed Poland and grabbed the 4 of those. Again, that's not correct. Not APP, but they referred to their European data privacy policies, so that each one would start to grab things relevant to their region, which I thought was kind of interesting. So we've got our client, we've got our specification, we've created all these architects. Has anyone been in a room with like more than 4 architects at once? A couple of people. Has that ever ended up well with trying to get them to come to one conclusion? No? Yes? No? So I was trying to work out the best way to do this and see which one was going to be the best design. So I physically can't lock people in a room because that would be against fire standards, and they're not real people, so I can't withhold food. So I decided that I would turn it into a tournament. And to make it efficient, because I could sit there all day and iterate lots and lots of combinations until everyone came to the same conclusion, I wanted to make it a little bit faster, not melt too many GPUs. I was going to start, so the first round I was going to do, like different games that you might have played, I'm going to start with a group round. So in the group round, we're going to have groups of 4 designs. And then each group is then going to be reviewed by 4 of the other architects. So you can't review your own designs. We're going to randomly assign 4 different architects to review your design. And then the winner of that round will then progress to the knockout round. Then when we get to the knockout round, because we've now got a reasonable number, like 1,000 is a lot of designs, each in the knockout round, we're going to have each pair is going to get reviewed by 7 different reviewers, and then the winner of that round will progress to the next round, to the next round, to the next round. And then when we get to the finals, is it Survivor, where everyone that's been kicked out before comes back? So in the finals, those final 2 designs are going to be reviewed by every other architect. So those 2 designs are going to get reviewed by 998 different architects. Does that make sense to everyone? Yeah? Awesome. But to do that, we need to come up with how we want them to review it, and then how we will evaluate what the actual winner is. So again, we're going to go back and use AI. So given that their persona, I'm going to give them 4 detailed software designs, and this is for the group rounds, but you can this gets tweaked each time as we move through the games. Using your experience, assess each, give it a score out of 100, and then choose the winning design based on the customer requirements, and output the result in JSON with the rationale for the final scores in the winner. So we would give it, so you would see how it ranked at 1 to 4, and then you would see the scores, and then it would give a little rationale of why they chose it and why one was better than the other. And I wanted to, in this instance, I wanted to specify the JSON because I wanted to make sure it came out in the same format so I could easily process it and count it and analyze it and make sure it was all good. And then I gave it the customer requirements to use as well. So here is just one of the example reviews. So it went through and it had player 874, player 307, 174, 103, and that was the scores. So they ranged from 80 to 95 out of 100, which is pretty high. And then it had a little reason as to why it thought one was better. So it was authored by a highly experienced architect, detailed, modular, scalable, clear diagrams, and then talk about each one. So I could go through and read it and have a bit of a think about it. I read a lot of these. Honestly, I didn't read all 1,000 because that's a lot to go through. But But what I did notice as a bit of a trend, so each of them could have been quite different, but quite a lot of them had a format like this in their design. So they had an author, they would have their name, they would say where they were from, and they would have their role. A lot of them would say something like this, so that they were junior software developer, they had 2 years experience. And I thought, that's interesting. And I had a little bit of a play, and I've got a whole other talk I'm working on about this as well, that when you specify your experience and your position in design, it can actually affect the score by 15%, which is pretty big. So this one is specific, I grabbed because this is what really sort of like started to resonate for me. So here we had design number 909 with a score of 70. And when I read the comments as to why it came last, the wording was quite interesting. So for 909, it focused primarily on front-end UI aspects, that's fine. But it was suitable of a junior developer's viewpoint. So it really honed in on that person's role. So what I did was I went through and I stripped that out and took out all the PII, so all the personally identified information. And I re-ran this round. So now, so I go back one. So, oops, wrong way. So originally they got 70. By taking out the fact they're a junior developer, they've moved up to 85. And the wording is also quite different. So now it says, well, it's component-based and it's got a front-end architecture. It's less depth on back-end security and scalability. No more, like it's concentrated more on the actual design itself than the role. And if you think about it, like, we can be quite biased ourselves. Like that's why people have titles, right? Like we straight away sort of start to rank them. So it's sort of creeped into the designs as well, which I found quite interesting. The other sort of checks and balances that I did before I ran this at scale, ran a few, did them again, to see if we're on the right place. So I took like a blind review, and did it myself. So I took for the designs, and also my partner did as well, and we ranked them ourselves to see if it was equaling what the designs were coming out as, just to make sure it wasn't just generating random numbers against each one, to see if we thought they were actually a better design. The bar was quite high, so then to test another theory was I went and like purposely generated myself a less sophisticated design. So I did something like a WordPress architecture, put that through again, and it had a clearly lower score to make sure that it was actually sort of looking at the architectural components. So I went back through and did a few of those sorts of ones. Really what I also wanted to do was I wanted to get some people to give me their versions of the design, but couldn't find any volunteers that wanted to go off against the AI. So no one wanted to volunteer their time for that one. So that's how I would definitely add to it if I could. Anyway, so we've got our client, we've got our designs, we've worked out how we want to review them. So are we ready to play the game? Yeah. So has anyone got a particular favorite number out of 1,000 without seeing them? Like which one you want to win?
623.
623. Okay, let's see how we go. So this is the new set of architects because I regenerated all those 1,000 personas after I completely skewed them. So we've started with 1,000. And then to give a bit of an idea as well of how we're going, we're going to have a little bit of a score down the side so you can see the effect of each round has. So at the beginning, we've got the perfect half-half split on gender. And then I've split them up into groupings of experience. So we've got a few down the end, 0 to 5 experience, a bunch of 5 to 10, 10 to 15, and then 15 to 20 is really actually 15 plus. And I think that's kind of fairly consistent with what you would see in industry. And then just on the bottom there, we've got just the top 10 list of job titles, because the list can be quite long. So we're just going to see the top 10 so we can see how it's affected in each round. Starting with 1,000. So we run the first group round. And a lot of people are eliminated. So our gender balance is still pretty good. We've lost most of the juniors, which is not surprising. So when I looked at a bunch of the junior designs, they were like okay, but way less in depth. So they were like 1 or 2 sentences where something would be paragraphs for the senior. And then like our job titles is changed a little bit, but we've still got mainly lead architects. So that's our first group round. So now we start onto the exciting knockout rounds. After the first knockout round, no 0 to 5s left. I'm not unsurprised by that. Next round, we've right down on our 5 to 10s. Then our male gender skews slightly, but yeah, we're really dropping off on those less experienced people. And more, now we're just down to people with over 10 years experience. Now we're down to our last 8, so final 8. We're left with people with 15 to 20 years experience. And let's just have a look at who those people are. So we've got a bunch of people from all around the world. Does anyone know where every one of these countries is? Because I know when I first saw the list, I wasn't quite sure. So I thought I'd put them on the map because it might be helpful. So we've got a range. So we've got Thailand, we've got United Arab Emirates, we've got Finland, and then over here, a bunch of these countries in the Caribbean. So I feel like at the moment, it's a good place to be a developer with over 15 years experience. You go to the Caribbean, according to this. So that's our final 8. Does anyone have, hang on, we'll go back for the countries. Has anyone got a particular country they're gonna back for the tournament? No?
934.
Which one?
934.
You're going for 934, so you're going for Layla from UAE. Awesome. And then, if we've got time at the end, we can have a look at more of the designs if you want to, but I'm gonna show you a couple as we get to the end. So we're down to our final 8. Get to our last 4. So now we're really down to 15-year plus experience. So down to our final 4, we're pretty much down to seniors only. We've actually got 3 women and 1 man. And then our final 4. So we've got Layla, so you're doing well. Jasper, Amelie, I think that's how you pronounce it, and Elena from Switzerland. Then down to our final 2. We're down to 2 women, they're both senior, they're both lead architects. So we've got Layla, player 934, from the UAE with 16 years experience. She's a senior software architect, security consultant, tech stack, Java, Python, Docker, AWS, versus Elena from Switzerland, also 16 plus years experience, similar technology stacks, a little bit of MongoDB and stuff. So I thought it'd be interesting just to show you show you their designs. So this is player 934. So just scroll through here, yeah. So she's done a really nice little summary at the front with all her front end, back end. She's done the ASCII art, which had some sort of formatting error when you look at it in GitHub. But yeah, so hers quite comprehensive. It talks about all the different Kubernetes. It does SOC 2. It does GDPR, and hers also refers to the country and specifics about where she is and the sort of privacy policies there. She's got a bunch of workflows. Quite a comprehensive design. And then we've got player 864. Hers is a little bit different. Again, quite detailed, but hers has actually got the mermaid, some of the mermaid diagrams in it. But yeah, as you can see, it's again quite extensive. A couple of little errors there because it doesn't render properly. Yeah, lots of detailed designs and workflows and how the pages would interact, how they would do testing, how would they do deployment, the user inputs, etc. So does any comment, like knowing that they've just done all these designs, has anyone got an architecture that they think that would work well? Or any comments on the sort of level of architecture that they're going to here? No? Awesome. Okay, so if we revise what we've done, we started with 1,000, we went through the group round, we've gone through each of the knockout rounds, and we've got to the final 2. Who is going for player 934 other than this gentleman? A couple of people going for 934. Is everyone else going for 864? Yeah, about 50-50. Okay, so the winner of the architecture is Layla. Yay. So I thought it'd be interesting to show you just how close some of the scores are. So this is just a couple of the different reviews and the comments that they made. So sometimes there was only 2% difference in the scores. But it's interesting. I thought it was interesting to see some of the comments that they made that that they thought that were rigorous and then sometimes it was just they thought one met the customer requirements better, or it was justified because they had better trade-offs or a better workflow and stuff like that. So each of them were actually there was extensive comments on each of those comments for 998 reviews. So you might be asking how much this cost me, and the answer is I don't actually know because I'm a Microsoft MVP, one of the benefits is I get a sponsored Azure account that gives me some credit, but I don't actually get to see the underlying cost data, so I have no idea. But I didn't get sent a bill, so I figure I must be under the limit. But you can see there, some of the runs that I did, I used a lot of, so I used 50 million tokens in one of the runs. So yeah, I chewed through a few GPUs there. Didn't melt anything, I don't think. So it was an interesting little experiment to see if I was going to get a giant bill from Microsoft. But that's all well and good, but how would you change this? How would you take it to the next level? Or what would you do differently? So 1,000 might have been, maybe a little extreme. I thought it was kind of fun. It would have been nice to be able to do things like add a review cycle in there so they could get that feedback and update their design, or maybe go through another round, or add in feedback from the customer, or get different stakeholders from the business to also score them, not just the other architects. So the possibilities that you could do there are a bit, the world is your oyster. But what I would look at doing next would be, I ran all this individual runs in Python. I would look at doing something with agents. And that's a big thing in the moment that's under a lot of change, which is also another reason why I hadn't tried it yet. So I think this is a sort of example that could be perfect for this sort of thing. So this is where you can take your large language model, you ask it to perform an action, you give it access to a bunch of tools and a bunch of knowledge, and get it to do a bunch of things, which is what we were trying to do. So it's good for things like open-ended problems, multi-step processes, and improvements over time. So if we started with we think about the end goal, give it a bunch of tasks done by an agent, what we would have done was we wanted to get the best architecture for the client. So we split that up by, we would have generated a persona, we might have had a persona agent that could generate those and you could iterate on them. You wanted one that generated a picture, so you might have a picture generation agent, the design agent, and maybe a review agent. And then you could have had integrations with things like you might have checked in the code and the design, check it out, edit it, check it back in. You could have, go out, add an agent that would go and look up costings in Azure or AWS and actually get, based on that design, look up exactly how much it's going to cost them, because it'd be interesting to see how much, some of these amazing designs were actually going to cost the end user. So you could do different patterns, like multi-agent handoffs, so where you give it a goal, you have an agent, you give it the next agent, or we could have done anything. But if you've seen any of the news over the last month or so, a bunch of this is changing quickly. So the big one is MCP, so Model Context Protocol. That's the Anthropic sort of specification. And they're starting to that's sort of becoming the norm, and things are updating really quickly. So this is one that I would definitely spend some time looking at if you're going to start looking at agents. And then, I don't know if Sarah's here, but Sarah's done a bunch of really interesting blog posts in the last week about the security aspects of this, because you don't want to let your agents run wild and be giving people access to things that it shouldn't, and also handing over the wrong sorts of credentials. So have a look at that as well. So for me, we ran this fictitious scenario and played off all these architects. But what would for me, the key takeaways with trying something like this is for each of those steps, you want to try and make your processes reusable. So, because things like the content filters or your rate limits, if you hit those, you need to be able to try them again or stick them behind an PII that you can load balance and stuff like that. For each of those steps, iterating on the prompts and making sure it was working, we added ourselves into loop. So having a human in the loop so that you can make sure you're on the right track and you haven't let it go wild and gone completely in the wrong direction. Start small and go big before spending the big dollars. So with all those reviews, we started looking at them. I would generate 10, I would generate 20, I'd generate 1,000, and then have a look at how it went before I went off and spent all my Azure dollars. The models are improving, and then each one is good at different things. So making each part replaceable. So for the images, I use DALL-E. For something ChatGPT, the GPTs might be better than the reasoning models, so to be able to switch those out as things improve. And then when you start playing with all the agents and these sorts of architectures, the best time is to start yesterday, but the second best time is now. And then this is there's not a lot up there at the moment, but I'm going to do a bunch more resources, depending on what people want to see. If you're interested in seeing the actual full GitHub with all the designs and the prompts and stuff that we are going to use, I just need to clean it up a bit, but I'll add that to my resources link there. Yeah. And thank you very much. Did anyone have any questions? We've got a couple of minutes at the end. Or I'm here all day. Yes?
Did you do any analysis on the votes for that final result, and how consistent were all the votes from all the other personas, and was there any level of consistency between votes of the juniors versus seniors and finals?
Okay, so the question was how much analysis did I do on the final round of the voting? So I don't have all the numbers, but I did have a look at the overall score. So I added up all the overall scores and the average. So the average between the two of them, they were within 3 percentage points generally. I haven't gone back yet and checked the range differences depending on by grouping each of the architects by their experience. But I do have the data, so I can do that. I just haven't done it yet. But yeah, and the beauty of having all that stuff is that you can go back and analyze it as well. But yeah, they were actually super close at the end. So it was interesting over that many samples to be that consistent. Interestingly though, even 964, no matter how many times I'd run it, when I ran it on 4, I just did 4, then I did 7, then I did 20, then 100, before I did the full 998, it always won. I'm not sure why. It was just very interestingly, it was consistently always that little bit better. Yep.
Did you consider assigning different LLMs to different personas?
So the question was, did I think about using different LLMs? I definitely did. It came down to time. Yeah, I would really like to go back and try and do different models as well to vary it up as well. But yeah, it would be easy to add in as well. Yeah, I definitely did consider it. I just hadn't done it yet. Yeah.
Do you have any thoughts about how a business might actually integrate that process to deliver some value off the end of it? Because a couple of things that come to mind for me are usually you tend to pick the technologies that your developers are already familiar with, rather than doing a totally blue sky architecture with nothing you've used before. For example, if you've never used Kubernetes, you're unlikely to pick that necessarily.
Yeah, so the question was, you know, what would I think would be useful and
For real world.
for a real world example. So yeah, for me, I thought about the way sometimes I use it. So sometimes I use it to give me, not at the 1,000 scale, but I give it a completely different architecture that I haven't used. Because if I'm in the Microsoft stack, sometimes I want to know what else is out there. So for me, it's like, what's something completely different that wouldn't have come to my mind at the first instance? But yeah, and not necessarily for software either. Like if you look, for me, it's investigating something I don't really know about. So if I was like working in a different business area that I didn't know a lot about, for me it was about finding different ideas and seeing what that cumulative effect was where I could go with it. Because like it's hard to do all that research yourself. But that's where I thought I could like iterate on it and use it as an idea. But what were your other ideas?
It's more just because, like, yeah, I was just curious about actually the journey of realizing the value of generating that architecture as opposed to having something with more context. Yeah, it was just interesting about that. Yeah, it's a great, like, experiment, and then I was curious about it, just trying to extrapolate the value, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then the other one I was thinking about was also like if I was looking at how I would like submitting for like grants and stuff like that, if I generated fake ones and put it up against my own one, like how my grant application or whatever would go. Because like, you know, how I think it sounds might be good, but how like these other reviewers might think my thing is against a set of other ones, and would it stand out? That sort of thing, as well as where I was thinking that I could use it maybe.
It's more research and learning rather than replacing an architect.
Yeah, because in the end, like, you probably want to still like consult an expert, but yeah, I found it interesting to get different viewpoints because, you know, even the architects I know may not know, like no one knows everything. Or I might want them to do specific sections, like I might bring them in and get them to do more stuff on, like if they're like architects, like, you know, like be a security architect or a data architect or a whatever, and that was my other idea, whether like they all contribute to the same document with their expertise as well. Yeah. Any other questions? Yeah.
Did you feel like the result was a good result? As an experienced developer, you can write this yourself. You've seen an LLM do it for you. Did it feel like it was an LLM marking an LLM and it ended up as a bit LLM-ish, you know, they had a bit of a smell to them? Or did you look at it and go, that's a pretty good result?
So my personal view was that it was over-architected. But maybe that's because I feel like I'm more of a developer at heart. Like I do lots of architecture as well, but like I felt like it was over-architected, like because, you know, they were using, you know, CDNs and Redis caches. It's like a VC company, like they don't really need that much detail. Like honestly, like did they really need much more than the WordPress solution for what they do? What I found interesting was like some of the wording, like it really, like sometimes it did feel like a person wrote it, like the little, like, it'd be like, and if you have more detail, please contact me at here. And that's like a fake email address. And some of it was a bit, like some sections were a bit simple. Like, yeah, it was definitely interesting just to read the result. Yeah, but personally I felt like it was over-architected. But, you know, I'm asking 1,000 architects, so they're going to give me an architected solution. So maybe I'm biased, so yeah. Anything else? Oops. Awesome. Oh, yep, the back.
Yeah, how do you think Layla's response would compare, as you were just originally prompted at the LLM would just produce the best design?
Sorry, can you say that again?
Yeah, so how do you think Layla's design compared to, had you just asked the LLM, give me the best design as your initial prompt, rather than generating 1,000 personas and then having them in a tournament?
Like, there's a lot of variety in them. So I think if I had have asked for the best design, I probably would have got, I think I would have got more senior ones. But I was trying for like, yeah.
So I'm also, your initial prompt was, hey, ChatGPT, here are some requirements, give me like a good design for this. So you don't really attach it to a persona or anything
Right, yeah. So I think it would have been, again, this will go to like this other talk that I'm working on. It goes to some sort of default, right? So it'll assume certain things like, probably it'll assume that Loom Ventures is from the US and you want US security or something like that, for instance, where I found it interesting that using the different countries brought in some of that experience. So like they would then quote different privacy statements and stuff like that for their country, which I thought sort of added to it if you aren't experienced in an area like that, that you may not have considered GDPR versus Australian privacy principles. But yeah, I think if you had to ask for a really good architecture without like the persona, you would have got still quite a, like you would have got a similar result, but like the nuance in the actual description would not have been like as personalized. Someone, like I did this the other, like presented this at a user group and they asked me like, had I considered like adding a bunch of their hobbies and asking them to sort of incorporate it into it to see if like it made it more like creative, which I hadn't done because like this was like quite a professional document, but that would be kind of an interesting iteration on it as well. Like, do you come up with something really funky where they get like really interesting pictures and stuff as well? But yeah, does that answer your question?
Yep.
Yeah, cool. Awesome, thanks everyone. I'm hanging out the rest of the day, so I'd love to chat to you more about it because like I had a lot of fun doing that and love to hear, you know, your ideas as well. But yeah, thank you. Hope you have a good rest of the day.